There are some seats here in the front. Second row. Okay, so welcome to this event arranged by Iceland Geothermal in cooperation with the Icelandic Foreign Ministry. We have a busy schedule ahead of us, so just let's start. We'll have some opening remarks from the Minister of Foreign Affairs and then followed by presentations about geothermal use both in Iceland and in Europe and about energy politics in general. So I would like to welcome Gunnar Bragi Sveinsson. He is the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Iceland. He was elected as a member of the parliament in 2009 and was then appointed as a minister in 2013. He is a member of the Progressive Party in Iceland. He has been active in politics since of early age, since he was this tall. And he has also been active in local businesses as well. So please welcome Gunnar Bragi Sveinsson.
Thank you. As you can hear, we have to compete with the Peruvians. There's a lot of fun with them. Maybe we can go over and dance after this meeting here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by describing a typical winter in Iceland. Actually, there is no typical winters in Iceland. We learned that yesterday. People back home is dealing with a hurricane, if I can say so, with a lot of wind and snow and rain and bad weather. We wake up in our warm houses, we shower in warm water, and head into our cars, waiting on a snow-free parking, heated all of this by geothermal energy. At the end of a busy day, we take the time to do our favorite outdoor winter sport, swimming and relaxing in thermal baths. This is a great quality of life in an Arctic country, and these are just very few of the endless possibilities of using geothermal energy in our daily lives. The list can go on, but in short, there's a problem with this computer. It's so sensitive. It's almost as sensitive as a politician, I can tell you. As I said, but in short, we have a whole variety of industries thriving in Iceland directly related to geothermal energy. And this is besides space heating and power generation. There are endless possibilities, from fish farms to pharmaceuticals to warm baths. Who knows, maybe geothermal use is one of the reasons why Iceland ranks amongst the happiest people in the world. In any case, geothermal energy was a real game changer for Iceland. In addition to the economic benefits, it has contributed to increased energy security in Iceland, moving from reliance of imported oil and gas to being self-sufficient. The environment benefited also greatly, long before climate change was even discovered. The only smoke now visible in Reykjavik is the steam from the hot water coming from the ground. Today, over 90% of Icelandic homes are connected to a geothermal district heating system, and the remaining 10% comes electricity generated from either hydro or geothermal. Thus, Iceland is a real example of best practices when it comes to the use of sustainable energy. We want to bring our experience and knowledge to other parts of the world. Many countries possess geothermal energy in their backyard, so to speak, without utilizing it. To better support this process, around 50 companies in Iceland are working together in so-called Icelandic Geothermal Cluster, creating a holistic approach between research, industry, and government. And last July, the Icelandic cluster and its sister organization in France, GeoDeep, signed a landmark agreement where they committed to build up a partnership between Iceland and French geothermal companies. This cooperation between the two clusters is an important platform to build on when we expand globally. We have to connect countries and continents. That is why Iceland was among the leading countries launching the Global Geothermal Alliance under the auspices of IRENA. The International Renewable Energy Agency, 1 week ago. And this will be a unique platform to gather strong political support and foster a dialogue with the private sector and other stakeholders with the aim to enhance geothermal share in the energy mix. The Alliance will create a framework for new projects and also support existing ones, such as those that Icelandic companies are participating in Kenya, China, Nicaragua, Djibouti, and in many other parts of the world. France was also amongst the countries that launched the alliance, and I want to take the opportunity to thank the French Minister for Ecology, Sustainable Development and Energy, Madame Ségolène Royal, for her strong leadership. She has become a good friend of Iceland, made 2 trips to my country in recent months to study the use of geothermal energy with the objective of promoting it as a solution to climate change, and her role has been instrumental. Iceland has a long-standing contribution on geothermal in the developing countries, and for almost 40 years been working with the UN Geothermal Energy Program that we fund and run under the auspice of the United Nations University. Through this program, more than 500 geothermal professionals from over 40 countries around the world have been able to bring back expertise and know-how to their countries. And finally, dear friends, our presence at COP21 is of vital importance. We have a serious matter to solve, and we must have a fortunate to seize the unique opportunity to make a transition to a new way of harnessing energy, clean and sustainable. Only by working together, we can make a real change. It has to happen now on our shift. We want the Icelandic story to be repeated wherever possible, and the story can only have a happy ending for the planet. So thank you all.
Thank you, Minister, for your overview and your insights and giving us knowledge of what's happening in high-level politics. We are truly blessed with our natural resources and the geothermal resource especially. And next on the podium is Guðni Jóhannesson. He's the Director General of the Icelandic National Energy Authority. He is, and now I'm going to tell you a bit about Guðni. I could be speaking for several minutes, but I will try to be quick. He's also an affiliated professor at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, the chair of the International Partnership for Geothermal Technology, and the leading person for Geothermal ERANET, a European project for coordinating funding, geothermal research and knowledge base in European countries. He holds a master's degree in physics and did his PhD in Lund University in Sweden. He is a doctor honoris causa from the University of Debrecen and was awarded the Swedish Concrete Award in 2011. Guðni, please, the floor is yours.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Minister, it's a pleasure to be here to present for you the results from the work on geothermal energy for Europe within the geothermal ERANET, and amongst other things I will dwell on here. Because Europe has opportunities for utilizing geothermal, and it can make a substantial change in the CO2 emissions in Europe. This complicated picture here is what I look at before going to sleep at night, and it's very complex. It follows the energy from the energy sources to the final services that we are using from the energy. And it tells us where the energy comes from, how it is converted, and how it is used, and to the terminal use of the energy. I'm not going to explain this in very much detail, but if you look at the highlighted area there, you see that a large part of the primary energy of the world, the fossil fuels, is used for heat only. And using coal, oil, and gas directly for heating should be a criminal offense, because you are getting about 1/3 of the heat energy out of the system compared to what you could do with more sophisticated methods. So it's absolutely clear that if we address the heat by using more effective methods to generate heat from our primary energy sources, and also to use the heat in the ground below us, which we have in abundance, it's obvious that we can make a big difference in the world energy balance and then in the CO2 emissions. We really could continue producing all the electricity we want if we can master the equation of heat. Many people have been trying to master that equation over the years. Now, if we look at the world primary energy, some years ago, it was 2010, I think, it was 455 exajoules. That's a lot of energy. But about half of that was used for heating. And if we look at space conditioning and hot water systems, they were using about 109 exajoules, or 24%. So a very large part of our primary energy is used in a very inefficient way and very unnecessary way for direct heating of space heating and our hot water systems. Now look at Iceland, what has happened there over time. And what we've done here is to look at the different primary sources we are using. We've been using hydropower, we've been using geothermal district heating, and we have also been using geothermal for running our power plants. And then we see that for every kilowatt hour we produce or generate for our purposes with these renewable sources, we can compare the emissions to the emissions that we had if we had been using oil for the same purpose. And what we see is that the renewable energy sources of Iceland hitherto have saved 350 million tons of CO2. And we see that the largest parts there are, of course, the hydropower, because we are producing 5 times more hydropower than we need, and selling that to energy-intensive industries. But we see that a substantial part is simply because we have been able to convert our energy systems for heating houses and hot water to geothermal energy. Now, many countries of the world can do the same, but they haven't done it. Many countries in Europe have done it, have the possibility. They've done it to some extent. Here in Paris, we have an old geothermal heating system, but the possibilities are much wider. So the benefits of geothermal, because we can, of course, have economical opportunities for energy savings. We can improve this energy security of Europe by replacing geothermal energy with gas. No, replacing gas with geothermal energy, excuse me. Don't reverse it. And thereby we can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and we can reduce our dependency on fossil fuels for the energy use. We improve the quality of life because we have less pollution, and if we have geothermal energy in abundance, like we have in Iceland and many other countries, we can use it to improve, to heat also swimming pools for recreation and for many other things. And we can add this to the low carbon technology industry, develop new technologies and new industries that can promote the economical growth in Europe. Now, geothermal energy can be used in very many ways, depending on the temperature. We can start at environmental temperature using a heat pump to generate about 3 times more heat out of the system than the electricity we pump in. But then at about 50 degrees we can use it for many other things like snow melting, fish farming, swimming pools. But then up to 70 degrees and up we can start to heat houses, and at a little bit higher temperatures, around 100, we can start to use geothermal even for space cooling, and drying food and water distillation, freezing, and then we can have steam for industrial purposes. So geothermal usage is not only about heating houses, it's about many other things. If we look at this map of Europe, we see 2 maps here. We look at the untapped geothermal resources, and they can significantly contribute to the decarbonization of the district heating market. And we look at the pictures here. We see European cities with district heating systems. We already have built a lot of district heating systems in Europe. They are in place, but most of them are not geothermally heated. But then on the map on the side, the redder the color is, the darker the color is, the better geothermal heat. And we can see that the density of our district heating systems, where they are most frequent, also corresponds with the availability of geothermal energy for heating. And this is very important. This shows us that about 25% of all heating in Europe could be covered by geothermal heating in an economical way compared to other renewable alternatives that we might have. So, and the European countries, they are waking up. We can see here on the picture we have the ton equivalents of oil per 1,000 inhabitants, and we can see where there were 2005 and 2010 and 2015. It's increasing slowly in some countries, but we can also see the targets for 2020, and it's still on the march, and now we have seen new targets for France for 2030 yesterday, and they are much above this. So this is waking up now. It's growing. We can say it's growing slowly, but we can see that it's really multiplying, and we hope to see an exponential growth in this area in the coming years. Now, we can also, when we look at the number of geothermal systems, the number of geothermal district heating systems, we can see that we have also the same growth there, and how we expect it to be increased. And this is very important. The best way to conserve energy, to mitigate climate emissions, CO2 emissions, is to use district heating as a component in the energy system, because it gives us the flexibility to use low-quality energy sources for our low-quality energy purposes, that is heating and hot water. And that is very important, that we are not using directly high-quality primary fuels for this. And this is just to show how the targets are ordered, and we see that Germany, France, and Hungary, Italy, Netherlands 25 years ago, they didn't even know they had geothermal energy. Now they are one of the leading countries, and in Netherlands they have they are now auctioning out the renewable energy options. That is, they are technology neutral. The companies simply make a bid for a conversion of the transition of the energy system in some company or area or whatever, and the best performance, that is saved CO2 emissions per euro, wins the bid. And half of the projects in the last bids were geothermal. So geothermal is very competitive on the renewable energy market. And we also have a learning curve. We see that we have now in Iceland been developing the drilling technology, the exploration technology, and we can see that our drilling success of high temperature wells, for instance, it's now about 75%. And that is very good. 3 out of 4 wells are working and yielding energy, to usable energy. And that is very important that we come to this result, because this is very important for the economy of the systems and the possibility to invest, that we have this high security. And we look at the same trend in Europe here. Here we have learning curves for the Bavarian Molas Basin, and we can see that the the drilling rate, days per 1,000 meters, how this has been going down from 20 to 24 in 2008, and is now down to 12. So the drilling rate has doubled, and that is very important for the economy and, of course, for the success of the development. Now, to enhance this, we collected the countries in Europe that have been most active in geothermal in a work we call the Geothermal Eranet. So that is funded by the European Commission, and we are simply working together, the institutes that are responsible for public administration and funding, to build up a framework for cooperation within this field within Europe. And we have a vision to minimize the fragmentation of geothermal research in Europe. It's very important that we unite our efforts and do not double the efforts we are doing, but we try to make the most of the available financing that we have. And we know that even before, we had know-how in Europe. We had in UK cities, we had in France, we have in Germany, we have in Switzerland, a lot of know-how that can be brought, and of course Italy and other countries, Hungary. And by bringing this all together, we know that the more knowledge we have, the more economical the geothermal operation will be. And that is also a result from Iceland, that with research, without increased knowledge of geology and other things, we have increased our efficiency considerably. And then it's very important that we have the 3 pillars of the geothermal energy working together. We have the EGIC, which is representing the industry. And we have the ERA, which is representing the research. And then we have the Geothermal Eranet, representing the public administration and the funding. And these pillars together can make a strong foundation for the development of the geothermal energy. And this is very important to have all these things in place, because geothermal energy is economical, but there are a lot of misunderstanding about geothermal energy, misleading information. It's not altogether obvious that we have public acceptance for geothermal energy in all countries in Europe. And all this has to be addressed in a systematic and scientifically based way. And of course, money is very important. One of the projects which have become successful is the international cooperation, the so-called EEA grants. It was Iceland that were, and Norway and Switzerland together with Liechtenstein or some, that formed these grants. It was in a result of some negotiation with some customs in Europe from these countries. And but there's a lot of money in this system. And what we have been doing now, and this is, has been led by Orkustofnun, is to identify viable geothermal projects in those countries which are being assisted within this program, and to define a new, especially trying to combine geothermal with district heating. And then companies from these countries, together with companies from the countries which are more like Iceland, which has an experience on geothermal, can make a bidding on this project, and the best bidder wins the project, simply. And by preparing the project better and better, and the more experience we have, the more economical the project gets, and the closer to the project being totally commercial, and then our funding can be used much better in the future. So, with that, I give you this message from my neighbor at Bakkatjörn Seltjarnarnes in Reykjavik, a very angry guy, and he says thank you.
Thank you, Guðni. And you know, the issue of replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy, it seems like we are all agree on that. And we have conferences like this and events and talks. And still, well, the development is maybe happening gradually, albeit slowly. A transition is maybe something we could focus a bit more on, how we can be able to change our ways of using energy. And Hildigunnur Thorsteinsson, she has some insight on that. She is the Managing Director for Research and Development at Reykjanes Energy. Prior to that, she led the Hydrothermal and Resource Confirmation Team at the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Geothermal Technologies Office at the U.S. Department of Energy. She has also worked for geothermal developers both in the U.S. and Iceland. She received a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering from the University of Iceland, and then a Master of Science in Technology and Policy from MIT. So Hildigunnur, please, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. For those of you that don't know, Reykjanes Energy is an energy company in Iceland. We serve a majority of Icelanders with fiber optics, sewage services, cold water. We produce, sell, and distribute power, and we, last but not least, heat 74% of Iceland's building with geothermal heating. But once upon a time, we only used geothermal heating for bathing and laundry. The video shows women just outside of Reykjavik in the early 1900s washing laundry in rather dangerous circumstances. I'm happy I don't have to do this anymore, or my husband. So we used, that was our only use. And today, like Guðni was telling us, many countries still are in the stage of mostly using geothermal for bathing. At the time, we used coal to heat our houses, and with associated pollution and import costs. Later, once we had transitioned some of the houses to geothermal, the ones that were not heated with geothermal were heated with fuel oil, but also with associated pollution and import costs. So you might think that the transition to geothermal energy was an obvious choice at all times, but that was not the case. Back in 1930, when we started, this was a very innovative project and a big undertaking for a small island up in the North Atlantic. But the decision was made by Reykjavik City Council in the late 1920s to build a district heating system using the same hot springs that we saw earlier. They laid a 3-kilometer pipeline from the springs to an elementary school called Austurbæjarskóli. They connected a hospital, a swimming pool, and about 70 private houses scattered around. And anytime you are transitioning a energy system, there are always about three things you need to think about. There's the technical and institutional challenges that Guðni is tackling through his ERANET. There's the politics. There's always politics involved. There's vested interests, and sometimes they align and sometimes they don't. And then it's the practicality of how do we go about getting the public opinion to sway our way, for instance. So how do we do it in Iceland? First of all, we had to conquer doubts on technical feasibility. And I took this quote from a Reykjavik City Council member in 1928, and he is said to have said this as he walked out of the meeting where he approved the district heating system and the go-ahead for the construction. And he said this to the district engineer. He said, "I don't think I've ever approved such a completely ludicrous idea as to think that water can be brought all the way to town and that it will still be hot enough to heat entire houses when it gets here. It doesn't matter what you can calculate, you can never get me to believe that." And that shows the mindset that they had to overcome. And there were politics involved. This is the front page of one of our major newspapers from 1938. And you can see how big an issue this was for elections. It says, "Vote for district heating today." And they even splurged on color, because you can see the blue is color, very expensive back then. And it's the same issues we're dealing with today. Above, you can see a cloud filled with coal smoke. Below, you have clear skies. You have a woman putting coal into a furnace, whereas now she has a clean radiator. And then she could even, or the house could build a greenhouse and grow fruit and food and flowers, it says. So it's the same issues we're dealing with today, but that was 80 years ago. And then it's the practical. We did it in stages, and we expanded the system gradually, and I think that was to our benefit. We started very small with the houses I talked to earlier. You can hardly see it, but there's blue dots on the sort of in the middle of Reykjavik. And then 1933 to 44, we expanded the system even more. And this was a big undertaking too, because this was in the middle of the war. And we had to get supplies. We were going to get them from England. We couldn't. We had to go to the States. So there were many obstacles we had to overcome. And then as the city grew, we expanded the system. In the 1960s, there was a major move to move the whole city onto geothermal. And at the time, it was considered a privilege to live in geothermal heated neighborhoods because people were seeing the benefits and the quality of life that it gives you. And so in 1951, only about 52% of the houses were heated with geothermal, but by 1972, well over 90% of the houses were heated with geothermal. And when this expansion was happening, neighborhoods fought over which one would be the next to get geothermal heated. So for instance, the university neighborhood cut in line by bringing money to the project and therefore got to be in front of some of the other neighborhoods. And so as the city expanded, we continued to expand the system, and then the suburbs were included in the network. And now all of Reykjavik is included in the geothermal district heating system. But to do this, you need geothermal resources. We started with the hot springs I showed you earlier, and then we moved on to another area in Reykjavik, and then we needed more. And so for the 1943 project, we went outside of Reykjavik and to one of the suburbs, to a low temperature area there. And that's the two yellow and green resource areas. And then in 1990, we had significantly started to draw down on our water resources. So if you use a geothermal resource too heavy-handedly, you will draw down the water resource. So we had to expand even more, and that's when we started going to our high-temperature fields. And now about 50% of our hot water in Reykjavik comes from high-temperature fields just outside of Reykjavik, where we co-generate power and heat in our geothermal power plants. And it's an interesting fact that just before we started in 1990, the year before, we actually needed oil to heat, to top up the system because we didn't have enough resource areas. And that winter, the cost of that oil was as much as the daily income of the whole district heating system. So transitioning to geothermal has been a great benefit, both environmentally and financially, as I think Ásgeir will talk about. And in the same period, the 60s and 70s, there was a great expansion all over Iceland to move the whole country, every area we could, to geothermal district heating. And now, today's geothermal energy provides about 90% of the space heating and 30% of the electricity. And like Guðni talked about, district heating is widespread, and so our experience can be duplicated. Reykjavik is only a small blimp on the district heating network scale, and we are not the largest users of direct use either. China, for instance, is growing rapidly and starting to heat their cities with geothermal. What might set us apart, though, is how much of our geothermal resource we use for heating. So this is the world geothermal utilization, where space heating, the green part, only represents 10%. But in Iceland, space heating has a significantly larger scale. I don't know why the numbers aren't there, but it's 43% is the green part of the pie chart, and that's how much we use for space heating. And it has had a significant benefit to Reykjavik. These are the CO2 reductions just for Reykjavik and the surrounding areas. And what the blue bars show is what our emissions would have been if we'd used fuel oil instead of geothermal to heat our houses. And the yellow line shows the cumulative savings. And so to put this in some sort of perspective, our annual savings are about 3 million tons, which is 64% of the total country's emissions in 2013. And it makes a difference. If you look at how large a percentage of emissions come from our heat and power sector in Iceland, it's only 4%, whereas in Europe, the same number is about 30. So changing our heating and our electricity, of course, makes a world of difference. This is a picture of Reykjavik in 1930. It's a cold day, everyone is heating their houses, and there's a cloud of coal smoke lying over the city. To transition from this to clear skies, we needed resolve. We needed to overcome the technical issues, we needed to overcome the political issues, and we needed to overcome the practical issues. We did this. We have over 85 years of lessons learned and mistakes made that we are happy to share with anyone who wants to learn how we went about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hildigunnur. Lessons learned and mistakes made, both very important issues, important to share. Next speaker is Ásgeir Margeirsson. He's the CEO of HS Orka, which is the largest privately owned power company in Iceland. His previous positions have included being a board member in several continents, to say the least. And he graduated as a civil engineer from the University of Iceland and then post-graduated from the University of Lund. Ásgeir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ragnar. Mr. Minister, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to be allowed to join the session and talk about Iceland, about geothermal, and a little bit about the perspective to the surrounding world, because when it really comes down to the details and important issues, the energy industry in Iceland is not really a local issue, it's more of a global context involved in it. I will talk a little bit about Iceland, about our company. I'll touch a little bit about global issues, but mainly I will focus on different benefits of geothermal usage, which are in Iceland thought to be very normal, natural, part of our everyday life, but not always obvious. So it's worthwhile to think a little bit about those. First of all, a little bit of comparison to the surrounding world in electricity production in different countries per capita. And that's a typical Icelandic measure because there is very few of us and we tend to rate or rank high on a per capita scale. This basically tells us that we are producing much more electricity than the society really needs. And that is being used for heavy industries. Then on the pollution scale or emissions from power production, we are at the other end of the line, which means we produce a lot of power and it's clean. Again, looking at the world historically, this picture actually strikes me badly. When we look back a few decades to the present times, what I don't like here is the slow growth of renewables, the top layer of the diagram. There's been large increases of using oil, natural gas, and coal, and we have to grow the renewable portion of this picture into the future. And that's, I think, the main game. This illustrates what Hildigunnur and Guðni were talking about earlier, and it's important to look at the cumulative diagram in the center of the picture, to look back in the 1940s and 1950s. We see at the beginning that coal was the major source of primary use of energy in Iceland, then converted to oil, and later on to geothermal and hydropower. And this is a big step to take. It's an infrastructural change, as Hildigunnur was explaining to us, and this can be done elsewhere as well. Economical benefits. During those days in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, as Hildigunnur was explaining, there was also a big debate about the cost effectiveness of geothermal heating, because many people felt that this would be much more expensive to go geothermal than to heat with oil. We now have data showing the real facts. The red columns would show the oil bill to heat a typical home in Reykjavik or anywhere in Iceland, whereas the small green ones show the cost of geothermal heating. This is the size of the red column is of course dependent on the oil price at any time. But recent figures show that the savings amount to up to $1 billion per year. If we spread that on the per capita measures, it's $300 per individual per year. It's over $1,000 per year per family. We can roughly say that our heating bill would be somewhere between 7 and 10 times what it is today if we were still heating with oil. Plus then, of course, the environmental benefits that we have been seeing here this morning. And our minister mentioned the storm that was striking Iceland, and this currently is. It was really bad during the night. Iceland is pretty much like this today. Difficult, very difficult traffic conditions. And we have ways to deal with that. This is a picture from the city of Reykjavik. And there is a reason why we don't show a paved street with no snow or ice on it. We're showing here how we do it. We lay pipes under the pavements to de-ice the streets. And it's not just because it's nice. This is a matter of public health when it really comes to it. Because we have less car crashes, we have less traffic accidents, we have less people falling on the street and breaking their legs or arms in the winter. And this is one of the parts of the geothermal utilization that is really difficult to calculate in monetary measures, but it really counts. Not only the health services needed, but not for people to drop out of their job for some time because they broke their leg or got hurt. This is extremely important. And there are wellness benefits as well. This is also a picture from Reykjavik. I was actually with great pride when I first showed this picture in a presentation like this. It was in California. I proudly said this is not in California. This is in Reykjavik. The pond by the ocean is geothermally heated. And as Guðni said, we go to the pool. We usually say if you want to hear the latest gossip or start a new one, in Paris you would go to the cafe, in London you would go to the pub. This is where you go in Iceland. That's where people talk. Very early in the morning or even in the evening or afternoon. So, geothermal heat increases our quality of life. We have low-cost space heating and it's clean. We have heated outdoor swimming pools that are open all year round. Nowadays loaded with tourists, actually, who come to visit us. We have private hot tubs typically in our backyards. We have heated parkways and roads, as Guðni mentioned also this morning. Heated greenhouses. We are pretty much self-sufficient with vegetable production in geothermally heated greenhouses. There's quite a lot of fish farming, and that's a growing industry, fish farming that utilizes the geothermal heat. And we even have indoor soccer halls or football halls. And now I'm going to touch base on that perspective of the geothermal use. If there are any Dutch people in the room, I kindly ask you to bear with us to show some historical facts. There should be some noise with this as well. You hear it? So this was in Reykjavik in October 2014. We call this historic because this was not supposed to be possible to happen. Iceland beating Holland in the European qualifications. And then again in September 2015, again in Holland, Iceland beat Holland. How could this happen? Here's my explanation. It's one piece of the pride. There are of course many other reasons. Heated indoor football halls in Iceland. The first one built in the year 2000 in Reykjanes. Then several ones scattered around the country. So not all over, but pretty much all over Iceland we have indoor soccer halls. Most of them are geothermally heated. And now, again, this line is showing the soccer halls, and the red line is showing the FIFA ranking of the Icelandic national men's soccer team. So is there a link? In the summer, after we started to present this diagram, the captain of our men's national team quoted explicitly after embracing the Swedish coach of the national team and the well-educated trainers of the younger ages of kids playing soccer. He said, and then we are the first generation of football players that could play indoors in the Icelandic winter. Exactly. So those who were kids practicing in the early 2000s indoor in the winter, these are our main players on the team today. Qualified for the Europe Cup for the first time ever of a small country. And that's also a fact, the smallest nation ever qualifying. We say geothermal has a piece of the pride. Now a little bit about our company. It was founded in 1974. We operate on the Reykjanes Peninsula. For those of you who visited Iceland, it's where the international airport is, basically the area between the airport and into the capital city. The main goal was to utilize geothermal fields on the Reykjanes Peninsula to provide space heating. And when they found the hot, salty resource, they were very disappointed because it's extremely complicated to deal with. But it has grown a lot, and there has been a lot of learnings since then. So now we produce about 175 megawatts of electricity and about 190 megawatts of thermal capacity for heating the houses. We are the third largest power company in Iceland, the second largest in geothermal after Reykjavik Energy. We are the only one of those major companies privately owned, and we are 2/3 owned by the Canadian power company Alterra, which is a green energy company residing in Vancouver, and we are 1/3 owned by Icelandic pension funds. So actually, most of the Icelandic public benefits from our well-being through ownership. I'm going to dwell a little bit on the story here because I grew up in the area where this company operates. I'm born in December 1961, so when the company started, I was just 13 years old. I remember admiring the guys who were laying the pipe, digging the streets and laying the hot water pipes into our homes. And we were replacing oil as a heat source. Every house had an oil tank in their backyard, and there were oil trucks all around the streets filling these tanks to heat our houses. I didn't realize back then what it really was about, but I've realized since. And I was fortunate enough about 10 years ago to participate in a Sino-Icelandic partnership of developing geothermal heating in China. Hildegunni showed us that China is big in geothermal direct use. If I can ever explain a professional ego boost, it happened in China. Having visited places where we were going to develop geothermal heating, where there was coal-fired heating in place when we started working there. Doing the geothermal projects, drilling the wells, laying the pipes, coming back and seeing the coal-fired heating plants being torn down to remove the coal smoke, as was in Reykjavik in 1930, as is still in many cities in China. But there are now recent examples in China where the coal smoke is gone because of geothermal heating. Nothing compares to that in my career to realize the benefits of geothermal district heating. And then a little bit more about what we do as a company and about our resource park. This is about 3.5 minutes, so please bear with us to take a look. There is no such thing as waste. In the early days of these operations, we thought that there was a lot of waste. We've now gotten to learn that some of it may be used in a sustainable, sensible, economically beneficial way, and we have yet to learn much more, and we will. Geothermal utilization is not only about power production, it's not only about space heating, it's about so much more that has economical and social benefits. The resource park is a cluster of companies that reside by the resource because they have to be there to do what they're doing. And there's a great deal of research and development, innovative thinking, interdisciplinary cooperation between people educated in different ways in many parts of the world, and there is a lot of entrepreneurial spirit associated with it to get to where we are now, and we are just beginning. There is so much yet to be done. We kind of think that do what we can with what we have where we are, and we believe that nothing ages faster than the future. We have to keep moving, and if we can dream it, we can do it. The next steps in the resource park are multiple. Renewable CO2 from the geothermal gas, for example, for greenhouses. And we are now in 2016 starting to develop a new facility that will be operating in 2017, where we reduce H2S and CO2 from the geothermal gas to make a valuable product out of it. And there is a new fish farm being developed, and we are also looking into removing silica from the geothermal fluid to create a valuable product. There are multiple resource streams. It's the silica. There's a growing tourism and education business around it. The Blue Lagoon that was pictured on the video is one of the very largest tourist attractions in Iceland, and not to mention also that power plants in Iceland are tourist attractions as well. There is a lot of effluent heat that can be used in multiple ways, gas extraction as I mentioned, and not least there are metals, there are precious metals included in some of the geothermal fluid, and this is one of the things that we have yet to learn, how to extract precious metals from the geothermal fluid. I hope I will live the day when that becomes real. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ásgeir, for telling us about geothermal wonders, whether it be a football field or Blue Lagoon. Our last speaker, we have then some minutes afterwards for questions and answers, but our last speaker is Hörður Arnarsson. He is the CEO of Landsvirkjun, the national power company in Iceland. He was previously the CEO of the food processing developer Marel, and has been a board member in several companies. He did his electrical engineering studies at the University of Iceland and obtained a doctorate from the Technical University of Denmark in Copenhagen. Hörður, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ragna. It's a pleasure being here with you today and to talk about these interesting subjects. What I will try to cover in my topic is to talk about innovation in the energy industry, the innovation that we need, innovation that has taken place. I will try to do it both based on kind of Icelandic perspective, but also try to connect that to what is happening in the world, especially because we are here at this conference talking about the climate issues, and one thing that we always have to bear in mind that climate issues is not a local issue. It's not something that each country solves for itself. In that case, we have to think on global level. How can we affect the emissions that are taking place both in industries or from houses or power companies? How can we reduce that as much as possible? I will not only talk about geothermal energy. I think also that we need to think also about the other possibilities, and the innovation that is needed is often not only linked to geothermal, but more kind of that electricity is difficult to handle, and we need to be creative so it becomes more effective, and especially with renewable energy. We could ask why is fossil fuels, why are they growing faster than renewable energy? And one of the reasons is that fossil fuels are in many ways more easy to operate, easy to control, easy to store. So there you have benefits which we in the renewable energy sector have to kind of tackle, have to find solutions. This is a similar picture that Ásgeir showed, that how much electricity we are producing per capita. This is about twice that the next nation is doing, which is Norway. This also reflects that we in Iceland have a completely different situation, because we have already obtained what many of the nations that are here with us today in Paris, what they are aiming for. We have already 86% of our power use is from renewable sources, and we are 100% in electricity and 100% in space heating. So the question is more, in our case, how can we use our resources? How much more should we harness to both because of economical reasons, but also very importantly, also to play an important role in the fight against the global warming. At the same time, it's important to realize, although we have quite a lot of opportunities in Iceland, we have a limited amount of areas to harness. And the increased awareness of environmental issues is really limiting how fast we can grow, and we have to respect that. But looking at the renewable energies, this picture shows kind of how mature the technologies are, how well suited are they for producing electricity. One thing that I should have changed is that I should have moved solar up. That has just happened in the recent year. That solar is becoming more and more cost effective, and it should definitely be in the same area as onshore wind. But it's important for us in Iceland to remember that the three major technologies that are available to produce electricity from renewable sources in large scale, in an economical way, is hydro, geothermal, and wind. And in all of these technologies, we have been blessed with excellent resources to harness hydro, geothermal, and wind. And we have used it already. We are producing 5 times more than we need. But we also have to ask us, how much more would we like to produce, both on economical terms, but also to participate in the fight against global warming. In Iceland, we have kind of a unique experience also. I think that many countries do not have, especially with regard to hydro and geothermal, is that we are not only operating plants, as many countries are, but we are also designing, building, and doing a lot of research. So we have a very strong group of engineers and research institutes that are familiar with how to do research, how to select the right sites, how to plan projects, how to build them, and how to operate them in an effective way. This is a very good platform to leverage on, like we are doing by assisting other countries and other companies around the world to go the same route. It is important also to remember that this is a tremendous challenge we have. I show here how the International Energy Association estimates how the world energy demand will increase until 2040. And we see that even though that renewable energy is growing at a fairly high rate, which is a top number, about 63%, it's still only a small fraction of the energy we will be producing in 2040. And the main challenge in my mind is that, how can we be more efficient? This strong growth in the usage of energy is something that we have to be very focused on. There are two things we must work on. First of all, on the production side of energy, to produce energy as much as we can with renewable sources, with sources that have as little effect on the environment as possible. But then on the other hand, we have to reduce as much as possible how much energy we use. And also, very importantly, also to manage efficiently that what we produce, that we are able to use it, we do not spill it somewhere else. And I think in many ways that the biggest opportunities that we have in reducing the impact on the climate is by reducing or be more effective in the use of energy. We can do that in many ways with technology, with innovation, but also just by changing what we do, changing effects from traveling and others that we can really easy to change. But innovation is a key driver for the future. We have had a lot of innovation in the past, and we are always very proud of hearing the story of the geothermal development in Iceland in recent years, which is exceptional. But it's also interesting to see how such a development can take place, driven by kind of economical issues, economical benefits that people want to make a better standard of living in Iceland, mainly on cost issues. But then we get the benefit of the environmental issues, and I think that's maybe the key to the success of the Icelandic story, is that this has not been done with subsidies from the government. As we have seen in the past years, we have seen that the driver for the development of the wind and solar has been that we have need heavy subsidization from the government. It has worked. We have seen the cost of solar and wind now coming down to a level that it is becoming commercial, but still the growth has been maybe less than people have wanted. But to get up to this 100% utilization in Iceland, the key thing was that it made very good economical sense. We really saved a lot of money. As Ásgeir said, we are probably saving close to $1 billion a year with what we are doing today. This was not obvious at that time, but this was kind of really the driving force behind it. With the innovation in geothermal power production, there is a lot of things have happened, and a lot of things will happen. Ásgeir touched on many of them, and we in the power industry in Iceland are all very proud of the resource park they have built up in Svartsengi, or Reykjanes. I think that's a perfect example of what can be done, and I think that to utilize not only the power for heating and electricity production, but also to take all the byproducts, or many of the byproducts that could cause problem if you did not do nothing with them, and make a valuable resource out of them. And I think it's important for everybody in the industry to continue on this route. I think we are just beginning, and very important steps are taking place there. I would also like to mention an innovation project that many companies in Iceland are working together on. That is what we call the deep drilling. That is going further down into the ground, going close to the magma, to get much more power out of the geothermal areas. This is a very interesting project, still of course in the early stage. But 5 years ago, Landsvirkjun, we did the first test drilling in our area in Krafla. It went very well. We were very pleased with the results we got. We were able to get about 5 or 6 times more energy out of that well than in our conventional holes. But only a small kind of ridiculous problem caused us not being able to connect it to our system. We were this close, that we would be able to connect it, and it would have had a cleaner steam than our other holes. It would have replaced 5 holes that we were using, but a small mechanical valve, just on-off, failed, or 2 small failed at the same time, which caused that we had to stop. But this is typical for development. This is typical. You get stupid problems, but then you just have to continue. And we are very pleased that this project is continuing now. And the next hole will be drilled, hopefully this year, with HS Orca. But this is a very exciting possibility we see in this area to utilize our geothermal sites much better than we have done in the past. We are working on a lot of things, and so, there is need for a lot of innovation in the usage of the electricity. The only thing that we are missing in Iceland is transportation. More or less, we have solved all the other energy uses in Iceland with renewable energy. We are quite involved in the electrification of cars, and Reykjanes Energy is actively, building up stations around the country around that. But I would like to touch on that we are also working on the ships. We participated in putting electricity into one of the whale watching ships operating out of Húsavík. That is quite successful. But we see that will be very interesting when we see further growth in the transportation part of our community. But in these cases, we have to rely quite a lot on the development in other parts of the world. We will not be the leaders in developing electricity cars and ships, but we want to support it and participate it in all the way we can. We want to work with companies that are developing this because we think it is extremely important. One of the innovations that is very important in general for the renewable energy industry is the cost. The cost has to go down, especially around the world. We in Iceland have been able to be very cost effective in recent, right from the beginning. That's because we have a fantastic resource, both in hydro and geothermal. But we are seeing tremendous results, both in wind and solar. And this picture shows that just how the price of wind energy has gone down in the last 5 years, where it has gone down by over 50%. And if we would take the same number for solar, it is higher. So this is extremely important that this continues. So the world can continue to move over to renewables, because they do not have they cannot only rely on hydro and geothermal as we have done, but have to work with this also. The challenge that we are facing then, when we are starting to use wind and solar, and is the lack, and also competing against the fossil fuels, is the lack of flexibility. The lack of being able to control the amount that is produced. You can easily do that with the fossil fuel, especially with the gas power plants. So what is really needed on the innovation side is how we store electricity. What are the possibilities of storage? What are the possibilities of batteries? And that is an extremely important subject. It is quite difficult. It is costly. It is, especially when you talk about storing large amount of electricity. The lifetimes of these batteries are also limited. We see that with our computers and with our electricity cars. But there is a strong need for developing this, and this is kind of crucial for the success of further usage of renewable energy. The other way to work with this is very good transmission systems, to be able to balance between systems. But that's also a big task. But there exists a perfect battery that many people are not aware of. There exists a perfect way of storing renewable energy, and that is the hydro, which is a fantastic resource to both to produce electricity and also to store energy and to manage fluctuation. And in many ways, where we have seen a very successful implementation of the new renewable sources, like Denmark, That would not have been possible without connecting to Norway. There are now 4 cables going from Norway to Denmark, and they are really balancing out the fluctuations in Denmark. And sometimes the Danes are producing so much wind energy that is more than they need. Then they send it to the Norwegians, and the Norwegians store it, and then they sell it again when the wind is not blowing and at a fairly higher price. So they really know how to make money out of energy, the Norwegians. But the storage, is an extremely important issue, and the Norwegians and also in Europe they talk about this opportunity as a green battery, how you can use the flexibility and the controllability of hydro to balance and even take energy from the wind park and pump the water up and to balance the system. And we believe that it could be interesting for Iceland to be part of this green battery of Europe. And by doing that, we would have a very positive impact on the fight with climate problems and climate issues in Europe. So that's an additional benefit that we would have. We at Landsvirkjun, we are very much aware of the importance of supporting innovation in the industry. We participate in different ways to do that. We work with universities to support the education and research on energy issues and also environmental issues. We have a research fund where we support projects within the energy sector. We are one of the founders of Startup Energy Reykjanes, which is every year supporting 10 startup projects in the field of energy. We are participating in the Icelandic Geothermal cluster, and we participate directly then with several companies that are developing new products and services for the energy industry. So just the concluding words, I think the innovation is key and has been the key to develop the energy industry, especially taking it to the transition phase that we are facing now with the demand for reduced impact on the environment. We need to focus on increased efficiency. We have limited resources. We have also strong need to reduce the environmental impact that we cause, both with our power plants and also with our transmission. But we believe strongly that we have a bright future. We have a lot of possibilities, and a lot of positive things have happened in the past to support the route forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Hörður. Now we have maybe 10 minutes or so for questions. I would ask the speakers kindly to take a seat here up at the podium. I'm sure there are some questions burning in the room. Please, would you like to, if you would say your name and okay, we don't have any microphones, do we? No. Okay, so speak up, please. Yes? Okay, thank you. Are there more questions at this point or comments from the audience, please? Yeah. Okay, so
Okay, so I can take the question again. So I'm Jukka Ahonen from the Nordic Investment Bank, and in the last presentation there was this reference to this Iceland being part of the green battery. I know there has been the vision of building the extremely long cable from Iceland to connect Iceland with the other countries. What is something happening with this vision?
Okay, thank you. Maybe one more question. Okay, so who would like to take the first question? Oscar, of course.
Well, I would be glad to take the first point. Thank you for asking. First of all, geothermal fluid is not a single kind of water, if you like, or fluid. It differs greatly in mineral contents and qualities. So from, for example, the high temperature fields where we're producing power as well, the geothermal fluid is very rich of different minerals or salts or even gases, etc. So that fluid is typically re-injected into the resource after use of the plant. The water we use for heating and bathing is quite pure or at or almost at the quality of potable water. In many cases it's fresh, pure water that is heated up at the plants and pumped to town. So that is after use through heating or snow melting or greenhouses or hot tubs is wasted as bathing water from the households. So through the sewage system, as in any other place with sewage water. Does that answer your question? And the regulated temperature is an important point, and that's a very, very crucial one. Because as Hörður mentioned, we have to control the energy efficiency as well. And it doesn't make much sense to build a system without the proper controls. So we strive to use the temperature of the hot water from like 80 degrees down to below 40, hopefully close to 30 or even below 30 degrees. So use as much heat as possible and thereby using less quantity of the water. And that we have to do with proper controls in the systems, both in the plants or in the big piping systems, and not least in each and every home and household, so as not to waste hot water throughout.
Hörður, about the interconnector or green battery?
Yes, with regard to the interconnector, it's true, it has been, of course, been under evaluation for quite some long time, but over the last 4 or 5 years, we can say the commercial parties, both in Iceland and the UK, have been discussing it, and there is a strong indication that it would be quite feasible. But what is also needed is kind of the political side and kind of the intergovernmental agreement that such a project is investigated. And there was a big step in that about a month ago when David Cameron came to Iceland and met with our Prime Minister, Sigmundur Davíð. And on that meeting, they decided to form a task force to look into it, or to evaluate it, to get facts on the table, what the possibilities are there for example, from support from the UK. So I think for us that are very promoting that this is investigated, we were extremely pleased with that step. So we would say that there was a big step that was taken a month ago, but what it will result in, that remains to be seen. But it's very positive to get this formal dialogue between the two governments, and I'm very, very excited to see what will come out of that.
Okay, thank you, Hörður. Are there any more hands raised? Well, if not, it would be maybe to get some comments here in the end of our session, because we have been talking about geothermal as a sort of advanced technology. We know a lot about the resource and how to use it, and it's economically viable. So maybe Guðni and Hildigun, and of course the rest of you, what would you see as the most, what is the obstacle? What hindrance has to be overcome to sort of, spread the news, or I mean, get the use of geothermal resources more sort of in the world, I mean, more widespread?
Well, this is a very good question, because geothermal energy today, as we have explained here, it's in many places economically viable. It's saving a lot of CO2 emissions, and then when we are looking at much more expensive alternatives like solar, and that seems to be more excitement about that, it's very difficult to understand, because this is technology we have today that is fairly economical, and we can start working on this both for the benefit of energy security, for climate, for the local climate, and also for the global climate. And the thing is that in Europe, many years ago, there were many projects starting, and they were fairly successful. But then this belief in nuclear power, and this happened in many countries, also like Japan, that simply the government decided that nuclear power was the way to go, and it was no meaning to work further on the other alternatives. And somehow this has created the misunderstanding that geothermal energy and other energy alternatives have somehow failed. This was really somehow to simplify the politics at that time. But now we are in a different age. We desperately need to reduce the CO2 emissions. We also see that nuclear power is not going to do the job for us. Everybody agrees on that now. We have to look at other alternatives, and we have to also, which I haven't mentioned, is that if we look at wind and solar, which have come in rather strongly, and if we look at solar, even if it's a very expensive technology, a lot of money has been put on, not to only on research, but to implement this technology at a very high price. But these technologies have a large industrial backup. The geothermal industry does not have that. And I think that is a very important factor that we have to look at.
Yeah, thank you, Hildigun. Yeah.
And I think Guðni has touched upon the main barriers. I think the technical difficulties we have overcome, but I think it's the politics and it's the institutional barriers. And I think geothermal suffers from sort of the same problem that energy efficiency has suffered from throughout the ages. It's not as, you can't see geothermal resource like you can see the sun or the wind, so you need to educate people, you need to educate politicians, get them on board, and then get them to act and be excited about the resource.
Thank you very much. Ásgeir and Hörður, would you like to
Maybe
say
just
something?
one point in addition. I actually think that Hildigun mentioned a very important point, which is education. In my experience, I have seen geothermal projects not go ahead because what I define as the failure of educating the relevant decision makers. But then there is the exploration risk, the cost of exploring the geothermal resources and the way to finance those. So education and exploration risk are the biggest ones in my view.
Yeah, I think also, with geothermal, I think solar is a little bit benefiting from that now. It's kind of a new, it's kind of and people are always looking for a kind of a one solution that can solve it. I think the thing is that there is no one solution. We have to use all the different possibilities, and we have to admit also that regardless of what way we choose, regardless if it's hydro, geothermal, wind or solar, all these methods have significant environmental impact. They don't have impact on the climate, which is of course which we are mainly concerned today, but it's impossible to build these plants and often the process, for example, in solar, that also is quite difficult on the environment. You know, you need silicium factories and all kinds of factories to produce it. So I think that the geothermal is, or these technologies are always struggling with that. People are looking for a solution without any impact. You know, if we are going to use all this energy, and we are continuing to increase the energy we use, as the figures show, you know, we have to accept that this has an impact. The only way is to reduce the energy that we use if we don't want to have that.
Okay, I think that would be the concluding remarks from our speakers, and well, it's education and politics, and I would say just to all of you, just start spreading the news with us. I would like to thank our speakers. I would thank Iceland Geothermal and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you all for attending, and have a nice day.